Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Built Environment Marketing Show, hosted by me, Io Abbas. I'm a marketing consultant, speaker and trainer, and I work specifically with built environment firms. You can find out more about me and my work at www.abbasmarketing.com. Today, my guests are Nina Farrell and Emma Hutton. I met Nina online probably about 12 years ago. We looked back at our messages and we met up, and it was that long ago when we connected over on LinkedIn, of course. And I met Emma, I guess, in the past few years as well. So this is an episode that looks all about branding, storytelling, and its importance. And we talk about it from a visual communications and a verbal communications perspective, which are the kind of two areas that Emma and Nina actually specialise in. It's a really lovely conversation, and it's a slightly different vent from the FCB one that we did recently with Fliss, because this is more from a consultancy perspective and people who have worked with a number of architectural firms and design firms across the industry. It's a slightly different perspective, but just as valuable in terms of branding, storytelling, and you getting that perspective. Anyway, I hope you enjoy listening to the interview. Take care. Bye. Hi, Emma and Nina. Thanks so much for coming onto the show. Can you introduce yourself? You go first, Emma.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having us on the show, first of all. An absolute pleasure. My name is Emma Hutton. I'm a copywriter. My business is called Hutton, unsurprisingly. I provide brand strategy and words for architects, designers, anyone and everyone who works in the built environment. My focus on brand strategy is the actual branding part. So it's evolving a brand's personality, their voice, verbal identity. And when it comes to the words part, the copywriting part, I do anything and everything to do with words. Websites, brochures, books, white papers, award entries, anything wordy. I can do it.
And you, Nina?
Hello, I'm Nina Farrell. I'm co-founder of And Agency and the design director at And Agency. We are an independent creative studio transforming how the built environment communicates, and we collaborate with architects to create award-winning and brand digital experiences. I met Emma in 2010 when we were both working in-house for an architectural practice, and we've worked together on every single project since.
Let's start on the whole brand piece. I know my last interview was with Fliss Childs from FCB Studios. Now, if you're working with lots of architects, what is branding, I guess, to an architecture firm? So do you want to kick us off, Emma, from your kind of brand strategy and word perspective?
I mean, brand strategy is relevant to absolutely anyone and everyone who has a business. We always brand strategy, we just say it's this foundational piece. It's the piece that everything else stems from and grows from. So a good brand strategy is the foundation, basically, for how you show up in the world. And that relates to architects because architects have a business and they're trying to sell their services. So the key thing about brand strategy is asking the questions: who you are, what do you stand for, what are your values? How do you want to be perceived in many ways is the root of brand strategy. So it matters to architects because determining who you are, what you have to say, your values, how you show up in the world is how you set yourself apart, right? There's lots of architects out there saying very, very similar things, offering very similar services. So brand strategy, doing it well, doing it right, is the piece where you create that point of difference and you determine a way where you figure out a plan. It's strategy. How you're going to speak to those clients that you want to get in front of, how you're going to appeal to, people who want to join your business, how are you going to attract the best talent, the people that you want. Everything stems from strategy, from brand strategy. And from my perspective, the part of brand strategy that I work on is that actual verbal identity. So it's that piece, which there's lots of terminology around these things. So the piece that I think this is the part that can turn architects off. It's like, marketing, strategy, brand, communications. What's the difference? Why are they all these words? And why are you using all these words I don't understand? Can't you just bring me the clients that I want. But the bit I do is that kind of, well, we work together on the research and benchmarking, the deep dive part at the beginning, but then I kind of take control when it comes to this vision, the mission, the statements that determine those pieces that we talked about, who you are, what you stand for, your values, and then that is transformed into this personality and voice. So that's kind of my piece of what I do for the strategy side of it.
And then, Nina, how do you approach it from the kind of, because you're more on the visual side, so we had the verbal and the word side.
Yeah, well, as Emma says, we're there from the very beginning as well, because we work as a team. So I think, even before we even start on the who you are, where do you stand, we have to do the research and the benchmarking part of it. And actually even asking clients how they, the audience, how they're perceived is a really enlightening experience, because actually one of the hardest things when you're starting with branding is actually forming a really good brief. Because many times people think that what they want is the end result, which is the deliverables. But there's this whole process that happens beforehand. So actually getting a really good brief is part of the strategy process. So, for example, they might sort of think, I really like the website. I think it's really great, but we kind of talk to their clients and we talk to their audience, and their audience might say, well, actually, I don't think, it's showing you very well. It's not representing who you are. Then that informs how they then look at themselves. It is like brand therapy. It really is. We lay everything out on the table, and it can be ugly sometimes. And also, you have to
got
make
a white
sure...
jacket and a stethoscope.
Yeah, exactly.
Hello.
And also getting multiple directors to agree as well. So this part of the process. We work as a team. We're there in the meetings. We talk to them. It's part of the discovery process. And then from there, without the brand foundations, the tone of voice and the mission and the vision and the value, we can't do our job, because visual identity needs to be based on something, and it needs to be based on a strategy. Otherwise, it's not meaningful and authentic.
And they need to buy into it as well, which I think is the most important part. It needs to embody them. And it's quite interesting, because I work on branding projects as well. And sometimes you're like, this needs to come from you. Like, it needs to feel like you. These words don't feel like you at all. Yes. And I mean, it's quite interesting now as well with things like ChatGPT, when people are like, oh, we can just get it from there. And you're like, no.
Oh my God, don't.
Not if you want your own personality. Don't. This is Emma's.
Oh my God, don't. I'm having a heart attack.
Another podcast, AO.
I think it is another podcast, but it is. But it's the realities of the world right now. That is how people are starting to think. So we can't ignore that and go, oh, we're doing this, because it's like, actually, you do need to understand. But I guess, what else do you do in the discovery phase? So you go out, you talk to people's clients. What else do you use to kind of embed yourself? So talking to your client directly.
Yeah, so that we also have quite a thorough questionnaire that goes out, which really kind of starts to dig deep into, most companies that we work with, I would say, Emma, are kind of medium size, So sometimes they've grown very quickly from a startup to, and quite a lot of the time, maybe quite a lot of it's been done in-house, because it has to be, to begin with. It's a luxury if you can actually start with a branding agency when you're a startup. So what we need to do is to look at their business plan as well and see, if it fits with where they are right now and where they want to go. So this is the kind of vision stuff and the ambition stuff.
So the process is kind of, as Nina said, we do these questionnaires, we do almost like perception audits. I think this part that Nina was talking about is like super, super important, that idea of how you're perceived. And that's because how do you position yourself?
Though, isn't it?
Listen, it's so hard, because, what you're doing is people have a very sort of, one of the most interesting things I think that ever happens in those kind of initial meetings is asking each person in the room. So when you're out and you're pitching, you meet someone at an event, you're at a conference, you're in the pub, wherever it is. Who are you? What do you do? Who do you do it for? What's the, that kind of elevator pitch, essentially. And they're different, right? Like they can be super, like, scarily different sometimes.
Yeah.
So it's like going in and asking those kinds of questions. And what's interesting in those meetings is actually seeing the kind of revelation, coming across people's faces. It's like, oh, no, I didn't know that that's what you thought about us. And this is them. This is the people that run the business, that work in the business every day. And they're saying things that are different. So it's that piece of it. And then it's the piece of obviously speaking to clients, which can reveal some things you like to hear less, but are so essential in kind of determining that strategy process. But it also can reveal like the most wonderful insights, little nuggets, and it can buoy them up and give them confidence, reassure them that they, what they're doing, maybe a certain service or a sector that they're working in or something that they're pursuing is actually paying off. So those kinds of conversations around perception, I think, are one of the most interesting things and one of the most valuable things. Definitely reveals a lot.
And I think sometimes also it reinforces something that client needs to hear. And I think sometimes having that from their clients, it kind of like, you can see that it just sinks in way more than if we'd said it or anyone else had said it. But yeah, you're right though, going around a room and going, how do you introduce yourself? And it's just, but you can see they've never done that before or they've never had those conversations, which is just fascinating because they're talking about business, they see people every day. And it's like, actually, what are we?
Yeah, it's kind of going back to those super basic things. And that's why, as Nina says, it often feels like therapy. You're kind of stripping away so much and just getting to the crux of things. And sometimes, it's just those revelations, what you reveal in that moment and people can become vulnerable, or they become uncomfortable is probably the right word. You see a lot of discomfort in those meetings if they're going well, I think.
Yeah. And then you can bring it back in so they do feel comfortable at the end.
Oh, yeah, 100%,
of course. So why do you feel strategy is often seen as a dirty word or overlooked, Nina? Because I do feel this.
Yeah. Well, we've talked about this and we're not sure if strategy is the dirty word. And in many ways, is it brand? People are scared of the word brand. Particularly, I think, in the built environment, in a service industry, because I think we associate brand with product. And when we talk about branding strategy, we've suddenly started to think about really big brands like Coca-Cola and Nike, who have, are doing this very, very well to sell a product. But actually, the branding strategy process is accessible to everybody and small companies particularly. So I don't think strategy is a dirty word because I think in many ways architects are strategists. They, engineers are strategists. But when you put branding in there, it's like, oh my God, these visions of standing in a room with loads of whiteboards and marker pens and I don't know, these branding workshops where you're getting your Post-it notes out and I don't know. That's not what it is.
That to me, I would have thought it was the reverse generally, because I'm always like, nobody looks for the word strategy, which they don't. Let's be honest. I need a website. I need someone to do my press. And that's what they're looking at. So they're never looking for the word strategy anyway. So they don't even know why they bother. Whereas I think brand is like seen as, we can do colours and fonts, right?
Yeah, well, that's really interesting because actually that is that's kind of like my pet hate, really, which is most people think that brand is just a logo, but it's actually so much more than that. It's made up of the brand voice, which is what Emma and I work on, Emma comes through with. Without the brand voice, we can't actually do the brand identity, which is logo, color, typography, graphic language as well, visual identity, as in treatments on films, treatments in photography. So without these two things have to work together. They have to. They're really important. I think, I've talked about this before, but I can design you a logo, no problem. I can design something in Helvetica for you, your name. But what does that mean? What does that mean? What does it mean?
That was such shade. I really enjoyed that. So shady. So shady.
She's like, I'll design it in Helvetica for you.
With a bit of kerning, it's fine.
What else?
Maybe an orange. But, I think it's so important. I mean, even typography, we laugh, but typography is full of personality and is full of character. And we make judgments every day. So if you use a serif font, normally you're thinking publishing, bookie, that every single decision that we make once the brand strategy is in place is meaningful and it's considered. So the typography, the colour, the logo mark is one of the hardest parts of my job, because I then have to take all these huge values and all of this brand personality and put it into this tiny little stamp. But that little stamp is unique and it's yours. And from there, we can then grow. And that's when we come into the storytelling, which is the next part, really.
Hi, it's Io here. Just wanted to hop on and let you know about 3 new services I've just introduced for you. The first is a 1-hour strategy review where I will look at your marketing plans for next year and give you some ideas and approaches on how you can really make them work. The second one is actually a LinkedIn Power Up training session where I will take you and your firm through LinkedIn and how you can get the most out of this amazing platform to grow your business in 2025. And finally, it's an audit and recommendations where I will look at your current marketing activity and give you some recommendations and a roadmap of what you should be doing in 2025. To find out more, there's a link in the show notes to my end of year services. Take care. Bye. What's the kind of connection between branding, so you're having your brand, and then I guess storytelling? Do you want to go take that one, Emma?
Sure. So the connection between brand and storytelling is you can't really do authentic storytelling. You can't tell a story without having done the foundational brand work, because your brand is your why, right? It's who you are. It's why you exist. It's what you're about. The storytelling is the action of that. It's the how. It's how you say it, how you show it, all this work that you've done. In that foundational piece. So the two are to have authentic storytelling, to actually, go out there and have a great website that communicates all of these things, that feeds into your socials, that works across every kind of communication touch point, whether that's a film, whether it's, as I said, going out and actually speaking to someone. That's storytelling. And that all stems from whatever you have decided upon in that foundational stage, in the brand stage, that who you are, what you care about, what's your vision, what's your mission. Those values are absolutely essential when it comes to the storytelling piece, because it's a great way to, you form all these hooks that come from the brand that then feed into the storytelling. Like, it's the dream for a comms team to have a really strong strategy, because these are our values. So we can create story from this, whether that's, you're an architecture practice and a huge thing of yours is sustainability. Well, okay, that's going to be a huge part of the story that we have to tell about ourselves, how we communicate with the world. It can, it informs everything. So they're kind of inseparable.
And that allows us to then visualize that. I mean, it's a completely symbiotic relationship. They have to work together. And once those things are in place, as Emma said, it's an absolute joy, because you've got all the graphic elements that you need. You've got the voice right. You understand how, what this company is about. Is it people focused? Is it sustainability? Is it, a lot of particularly architectural practice, they think it's just about their work, but there's so much more to it. Stories can be found in every part of it. Why a certain material has been chosen, why has that material been chosen? What's the craftsmanship behind that material, that's really interesting. That's really interesting for the viewer as well. The people that are going to inhabit that building, the community that are going to inhabit that building, the impact that building is going to have on the community. These are all stories, and stories that people want to hear as well.
And I guess you can tell those stories in a visual way, i.e. what you're doing, Nina, but also in a more kind of, I'm going to say, a verbal way as well, right? So it depends on how you want to break that story down, or it could be a combination of the two, depending on what you're needing. So if you're going through to tell a story, what does every story need, Emma? What's the kind of process?
What does every story need? I mean...
What's the structure? Is there a structure?
Is there a structure? But now you see your brain, you're making me think about fiction stories and you're making me think about actual writing.
But I think that's where you can apply that. Yeah, but that's where you apply, isn't it?
You absolutely can. So you can bring those, the kind of standard, tropes that we talk about in actual creating stories. What's the journey? What's the hero's journey? Some architectural practices, their whole sort of their strategy and their storytelling kind of feeds into that. Well, we set up our practice because of these reasons, and we want to be the most sustainable practice. We want to do, whatever it might be, and being the hero in your own story. That's a trajectory. That's a story that you're telling. And you can talk about the challenges that you come up against, or what you're overcoming, or how you're being inventive or bringing new things into the industry, into your practice, whatever it might be. But like storytelling, it needs to communicate to an audience. That's the fundamental thing that storytelling is doing. And we always talk about bringing specificity to this, because a good story is a story that can speak to just a handful of people and really, really connect with them, rather than just saying something for everyone. Because if you're doing that, that's not effective storytelling. I
tend to write it for one person.
100%.
That is the thing. It's easier to connect. And I mean, you could actually have an image of that person who's someone you know or something, and actually write
persona. Yeah. But that is a brand persona, and that's sometimes that's part of what we do. We create brand personas as well of a target audience, because an audience can be vast. But that's actually really great. So do you visualize that person when you're writing to them?
Sometimes, depends what I'm writing, but sometimes I will do that. I think, who is this going to? Or it could be a particular person. But also, sometimes it might just be that when I'm doing a piece of writing, I just write down the goal and the target audience at the first, at the top. And then at the end, I can sense check it and kind of go back and go, is it talking to this person? Are they going to give a damn? Like all of that kind of stuff.
Speaking to the audience is the key thing that I think just gets overlooked so often. It's like, get that level of specificity. What you're saying is great. Picture them in your mind. Yeah. Write to them and them only. It's this thing of, I was doing some research recently just on small residential, like private, appealing to private residential clients who are doing like one-off homes, luxury houses and all these. So I was looking at loads and loads of websites for research. And so many and this is not just, this is across the board in many ways. And you talk about this a lot with other people in your podcast, just like people coming, architects saying, or design, whoever it may be, just saying, we are award-winning, we are design-led, we work across sectors. I mean, who cares? Who are you talking to? Who are you going to connect with in that way of engaging with someone? You're not. Whereas if you bring that specificity, it's like that super obvious kind of marketing thing. It's like, what's their pain point? And how are you speaking to it? How are you solving their problem? And I think that's the thing with storytelling as well that we always talk about. It's like creating that connection. It's like you have to be creating a connection. What's going to make someone engage with you? And that's visual and verbal. That's as much like the look and feel as much as it's about the voice.
I think it really comes together and really comes true in filmmaking. So if we're making a film, this is the perfect union of the storytelling, the narrative, the words, the visuals, the graphics, everything. Particularly if we're creating a campaign, for example, for developers, this would be a great example of that. And we try to, as Emma says, to think about it from different perspectives, not just showing an empty building. We want a building that's always occupied. I think interestingly, that's one of the things that I really loved when I worked for Van Hennigan and Howard, which was the first practice that I worked for. They would never shoot their buildings empty because it was always about the end user. And actually that is really important. And I've taken that ethos on really through the work that we do, because a building is not a building without the people in them. Yes, it's going to get messy and, but that's okay. That's life. That's where life and community happens.
When you say it to architects, they sort of look horrified at you.
Not all of them. Not all of them. What do you mean you're going to put that?
Those chairs
up on the wall.
But again, that's the point, isn't it? It's like, well, who are those? What's that film for? Who are those photos for? How are you engaging with them? If there's no one in that space using it, no one enjoying it, no one like we spend 90% of our lives indoors, right? Living in, being at work, being at home, being wherever but we're generally indoors, experiencing space. So whenever we see these images and there's no one in them, it's
weird.
It kind of feels like, a bit like David, like it's Lynchian. Do you know what I mean? It's just a strange kind of like
COVID. Like the start of COVID when no one was out.
Yeah. It's kind of freaky. It's creepy.
Yeah. I saw a film recently. I can't remember who the practice was for, but it was so beautiful because they basically filmed the reaction of the children walking into a space for the first time. So it wasn't filmed on the actual space itself. It was filmed on the reaction. I think it was a sports hall, and these children walked in, and the way that their faces lit up, and I was like, that's it. That's it. It's just absolutely beautiful. So that's what we're talking about with storytelling, I think, human emotion, connection. Yeah.
And feelings, right? And I think that's the thing that people kind of miss. And it's kind of like, actually, that's what you want. This is what our buildings that feel like to people, and this is how it transforms them, which is a much more exciting concept in a way, rather than...
It's an exciting concept, yeah. And it's just the branding is the foundations, and then the house is filled with people, and that's the stories that we tell, and they can change. That's absolutely fine. Those stories can change, and that's what's brilliant. The brand has to remain the same, but it is the foundations that we can work from.
And you've got some nice building analogies there, which is always good.
Well,
well done, you two.
Know your audience.
Let's talk about the foundations and the brickwork and the walls.
Should we talk about the windows as well? We've got a good one for not changing the website as well, which is like, stop putting new windows in when we're in the design process.
Oh my gosh.
I was looking at your website today, Nina. It's beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
Gorgeous. I was like, oh, this is really nice. Anyway, when it comes to websites, actually, how... Because sometimes I know when I do branding work, that really all people care about is their website, right? Quite a lot. It is.
Yeah, it's important though. Websites are important.
And I guess how much... Especially because you're working with other designers. I mean, how much do they want to be involved in that process, and how much are you left to it, Nina? No, it's an honest question.
Actually, when it comes to websites, they don't really get too involved in the design process, because actually a website is more than just the design. And Asa, my partner, who is the other half of and Agency, has come from a web and digital background. So we have a very tight process when it comes to creating websites. And we like to say that our websites are as beautiful on the back end as they are on the front. So actually, so many things are factored, and there's an engineering part of what we do when we build a website, where it's built for the user and it's built really, really well, and it's intuitive. So there's so many factors that come into creating a website. We create websites from scratch, so we don't work with templates. So once we've got the kind of brand foundations, or sometimes as you know, this is just the nature of what we do, we don't get to do everything, so we're brought in and we take on board whatever brand foundations are in place already, or brand strategies in place. So there's so many different factors involved in making a really good website that actually what we found is that we're actually left to it, which is absolutely brilliant.
But what about when it comes to the logo?
Yeah, well, the logo is a slightly different animal. That's a slightly different animal. I think one of the things that I have noticed, and I have worked with architects for a very, very, very long time now, sort of 25 years really, and it's allowing space in their design. Sometimes there's a tendency to want to cram everything in, which I always found fascinating because space is such an important, integral part of building. So when we design a website, the design part of the process, we do allow images to breathe and give them space on the page, which is really important. So I think when we get to the point where we present our first round of designs, they're normally so thrilled that actually the input then becomes more about content, which, I really hate the word content because I think it undervalues everything. But content in terms of website terms would be the words, the images, film, all that kind of thing. And again, Emma and I work together on the content for websites as well. So, I mean, I don't know if you want to talk a bit about words in websites, Em.
I mean, words on websites, my goodness. Less is more, I tend to think.
I know. I stuff too many words when I write stuff.
Yeah. Well, I think that's what I was just saying about images as well. Less is more.
It's hard, isn't
Allow
it?
the space.
It's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard with website words, but again, it kind of comes back to strategy, because if you are strong enough in your strategy and you have kind of, you know where you're coming from, you know what you have to say, then you can really hammer home those points and focus on that rather than just saying everything to kind of meet everyone's needs. But I love writing websites because if you can, when Nina and I work together, it's really fun because you can play on how the things are going to look, the size of things, how you're going to have like pull out quotes or, rather than it just being a very kind of straight up, straightforward, can you just put the text in type thing.
Yeah.
Font hierarchy is very important.
Here we go.
I am not going into font hierarchy. I refuse. Is it big, small, round, left, right? No.
Honestly, I could talk you to death about typography. It could be my specialist subject.
No. Passionate.
No. Damn.
So I've got a final question for you, which I'm going to ask you both. So if I'm an architecture firm and I want to figure out my brand strategy, what should I do to get started apart from hire you?
Go back to basics. I would honestly, just as an exercise for yourselves, if there's one thing to take away from kind of what we're talking about and kind of where you might start, I do think it's incredibly valuable just to get in a room with each other and ask, how do you describe who we are and what we do to the outside world? And after that, I would say very simply, like, why do you exist? And look at your values. What do you stand for? And be specific. Be authentic. Just don't say things because you think you should say them or that's what other people are doing. Be brave. That would be my advice. Just be brave.
And for you, Nina?
I mean, it's the same, really. I guess from a design point of view, get everything out, put it on the table. A holistic approach is really important. Things go astray, particularly in practices where there are lots of designers within the practice, people that can use certain software programs in design, for example. Look at everything that's in front of you and start to kind of bring it back together again. But that only works with the strategy first. The strategy has to come first. There are loads of strategy consultants like Emma and I that can come in and advise and help you. But I do think it is a guided process. I think it would be very hard to do it on your own, just because managing different voices in the room and different opinions and you need somebody that's outside to see it. And also, I think you can get quite entrenched when you're trying to do it in-house. I wanted to tell you this brilliant quote, which is from the CEO of Jaguar, which is, if you think that good design is expensive, you should see the cost of bad design.
Awesome. Thank you both. On that happy note, I'm going to say goodbye. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having us.
Bye.
Thanks so much for listening to the Built Environment Marketing Show. Don't forget to check out the show notes, which will have useful links and resources connected to this episode. You can find that on abassmarketing.com. And of course, if you like the show, please do share it with others on social, as it helps more people to find us. See you soon.